The Legacy Files with Grant Cameron.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and this is another episode of the Legacy Files. I'm joined by my co-author and assistant, Desta Barnaby, off on the east side of Canada. I'm on the west side of Canada, and we have one of my favorite topics today, which is gets a lot of people really upset, and that is channeling. And I'll give you my sort of version of channeling. Is Desta and I wrote a book called Contact Modalities. And in that book, we have the idea is that there's a field, whether you call it the Akashic field, the field, whatever you want to call it, that has information. And there are a bunch of techniques. I think we had 70 some techniques that people use to cut themselves off from this world and enter into these mystical realms or realms where you're able to pick up material. And you can go back to things like savants who are able to do mathematical calculations. They can't button their shirt, but they can do these massive calculations. And the question is, where are they getting the information from? So my idea is it's almost like we take all the computers, you link them all together in the world, and you need a consciousness to sit in front of that computer in order to build a computer, to build the electronics for to bring power into the computer. You need someone to consciousness to write the software, and then all the consciousness start loading their stuff onto this internet, and you have this physical internet that has all the people's consciousness. And now Desta and I are big into AI, and we do a lot of AI stuff, and that is just basically we're going to do a session on AI because we've done a lot and we've got some comments about it. But basically, the AI is just basically the collection of all the minds, the consciousness that are on Earth that have put stuff onto there. And now it is able to assemble it quickly and give you information. So you can ask about quotes on this, and it'll pull all these different people who have put quotes on the internet. But there's a higher consciousness. So our higher consciousness is like the Akashic field, where people who and have near-death experiences will see every event of their life, but they'll see it from a third-person perspective. Yeah, I talked to Desta, I got her upset. Desta was upset, and I get to see it from Desta's point of view, that what she felt like when I said something, and that shows you how complex this network of stuff is. And the Akashic field gathers everything, everybody's thoughts, everything that's ever happened is in the Akashic field. And the idea of the contact modalities is that there are certain people who are able to get in the field, who are able to interact with that intelligence. And when you bring that intelligence back, why it's so important, it's not left brain. What's happening on the internet now, it's all left brain. So you'll see a lot of, we'll discuss in our AI thing, that the thing starts to lie. It starts to make up stuff. AI, people don't realize this, making up stuff. Or the first time I realized this was he was doing a thing and it brought up Project Mogul. And I went, Project Mogul? Why is it bringing up Project Mogul? And I realized it was pulling stuff from Wikipedia. And that's the whole thing. So you get this left brain stuff, whereas the stuff that's in the field, I believe that stuff in the field that you're pulling down is going to be accurate. It's going to be the actual information that you can interact with this stuff. It's not a fake stuff. It's not a left brain thing. It's a female right brain thing where all this information is. So Desta has done a lot of channeling. Desta's got two books that we can link in this thing where if they want to see what she's done. And I go to Desta a lot because I'm very interested in channelers. I follow three main channelers. Desta, there's a woman in Albuquerque, and then there's Paul Selleck, who I watch very closely. And the whole idea is that I believe that they're getting this material, they're pulling it down. So Desta's done, I think that's how we sort of got together, is you had this vision. I think the day we went to the mall and you were talking and you had this vision about how the universe started. So maybe you can talk a little bit about channeling, about this vision, and why you think channeling is important and why people should actually pay attention to channelers. You can be skeptical of them, but you should pay attention that maybe these people are actually pulling stuff that has some value.
That's a hard one. Well, I'll say that download I got, I haven't thought about it in a while, but it just came when I was waking up one morning. So again, it's in these liminal states or these theta brainwave states that I used to always call them. And I don't know why it did, but it was, yeah, the morning, one of the first mornings that we ever met, maybe almost 10 years ago or 9 years ago or something. And I was just waking up in the morning and I had the craziest vision, but it was like, it felt like it was the world before, not even the world. It was like reality before anything. before matter even existed, before the Big Bang, kind of like what consciousness was or what source was, or I don't know how to even describe it, like before anything else was there. So all I was really seeing is this like dark, not black, but dark brown nothing. And it was just a sea of nothingness. And I would just like kind of like come to, as like, say I was a tiny little bit of consciousness, and I would like, come to awareness, and I would just see nothing, just like a gigantic, the vastness of space with no stars, basically just like black, dark brown goo kind of. And then I would kind of like get out of it for thousands or millions or billions, I don't know, of years. And then I would kind of like wake up again, and I started seeing this little tiny black cube forming. So there was no like words. So I wasn't thinking even in words. I was just like perceiving the event. And the event was just like from nothing to something started forming. So from the dark brownish, there was this black thing that was gradually forming, and then I'd like fall asleep or whatever, lose consciousness for a million years, and then I would come to again, and then I just noticed, like, without words, being like, shape is getting bigger, without thinking those words, but just like recognizing the difference, and then going, falling out of awareness again, coming back into awareness. And then, so after that happened enough times, I eventually was just like, again, without words, but just going like, what's happening? Like, what is it? And what it was like, there was many bits of consciousness. I was just in the place of one of them. And so what was kind of happening, it was like, this is before the Big Bang, you could say what science would call the Big Bang. And this is just like how things started changing, and how matter started forming, and how bits of consciousness started breaking off of like source or whatever. So it was like, what was happening was like different bits of consciousness were like coming together and deciding to break free and to make something. So instead of it just being nothing, and just everyone just like, just like living in nothing, different bits started deciding that, like, why don't we get together and make something? I don't know how else to really say it. And again, now that I'm into all this Gnostic stuff, it's like weird, because now that I'm saying it, it sounds like what the original, it was called, like the pleroma, like these bits of consciousness were called like the eons. And there was, there's 365 or whatever different like eons, and they were just like sparks, divine sparks, that were in like the pleroma, or the real heaven. And there was no world or planets or anything. The Sophia was supposed to have come down from that, and she wanted to make something outside of the how they were doing it in like the pleroma or heaven or whatever. And this is how this world and our reality came to be. So that's weird. I never thought about it like that. But my version of that is that that's like heaven and light, and like all like light beings and stuff. But what I was seeing was not that. But it's still the same kind of thing. It's just like people started grouping together and deciding, or bits of consciousness started grouping together, deciding they wanted to do something different. They were splitting off from the divine sea of consciousness and the source, and like trying to make something. So they were like going outside of what of this peace and like whatever, and trying to make something themselves, and trying. So this cube started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and what it was different things saying, we don't want to, we want something different, and we don't want to be a part of you, the oneness kind of, we want to be something. And so they started making something, and what it was making is this shape, and the shape was, a black cube for some reason. And but the meaning behind the whole thing was that separation. This is when the oneness, the one, separates. And this is what separation is, and this is what separation looks like. It's that when things start breaking off and deciding to do their own thing, starting to form their own thing. And that was supposed to be the beginning. I don't even know how it all like, made sense to me. And it took me a long time to even figure out what was even happening. But that's what it was. Yeah. It was just like the separation, the initial separation, the original, like the OG separation of the oneness
Yeah.
into
And
physical. And yeah.
yeah. And so you're actually writing a book on Sophia coming.
Yeah.
There. So
So
people get a better idea when that book comes out. Again, you're a basic concept that I think that you got through whatever process you were using. You can maybe describe the process that you used to get better into the field. So you were trying to get into the field, but you've got the basic concept that has come through monks who'd sit in caves for years. The Atman equals the Brahman. All the small pieces equal the big piece, or the alien Chandler Bashar. The one is the all are the one. And we wrote, maybe even in Contact Modalities, we had this whole chapter on oneness, all the different people who talked about this concept. So you got it through your process. So maybe describe your process. And for people, this right brain, left brain, how you get in the theta, that everything's frequency. People don't realize there's all these frequencies. And so almost like you're tapping into this frequency. It's there. Everybody can, God is talking to everybody, but only certain people are listening. That certain people can get that. And you had this background that allowed you through your training by repeatedly working on this, trying to get it. And then you got some help and suddenly you were able to better do it. So talk about your process of how you get this material and your two books that you've actually put out that have the material that you got.
well, my process is, yeah, it took a long, long time. I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I wasn't, when I started doing it, I wasn't trained. I wasn't taking any lessons and I wasn't trying to actually channel. I didn't know that that's what I was doing. The purpose was trying to communicate with my higher self. So trying to get to a point where if I had some big questions, instead of having to go and pay someone to regress me or to, to somehow be able to, I didn't like having to pay for psychics in general to have to give me messages. So I always thought I have to like figure out how to do this myself and like bypass having to pay people to do it. And I just wanted to give myself the message.
Yeah.
And also Dolores Cannon's QHHT regression hypnosis um, protocol. I took that because I couldn't be hypnotized, and I was trying to be able to get to the part where in the QHHT, when you're there with a practitioner, at the end, the practitioner gets to talk to your higher self, and you get to give beforehand. You give them questions that they can ask your higher self when you're deep enough into this trance-like state that you're down enough that you're answering, but you're answering from your higher self's, perspective. And
Explain what higher self is, just to
well,
interrupt you.
yeah, it's like so Dolores Cannon would call it like subconscious, but it's not really your subconscious. It's kind of more your higher self, and your higher self being like, I mean, your oversoul. There's a million different ways you could say it, but it's like it's like so hard to explain, but it's just like the part of you. You can also say like the big consciousness behind you that is kind of like leading you and is maybe your true self, or it's so hard to explain, but your higher
Mhm.
self is in the bigger part of you, like the I am that's really the I am, not the Desta, but like the big Desta that really recognizes that Desta is there, but it's not really that important because the bigger oversoul or higher self of me is the one that's really like leading
Okay.
the show. And so if you can connect with that bigger thing, then it's like you can ask questions about yourself and like why, especially in QHHT, you would be asking yourself like, why do you always get sick? Why do you always get in these same relationships or the same financial problems? Or you'd be asking about, well, did I really see a UFO, or why do I have these dreams? Or you'd be asking your higher self to help you kind of figure out problems that you're having in this life to be able to guide you better, instead of just going and paying for some psychic for their opinion of you. And then it's really difficult because you have to make sure you get a good psychic, that they're on their good day where they're going to give you proper information. And then you're just trusting their information. I always thought I'd rather have my own information. So I really just started doing it. So yeah, it's a long story, but the process is kind of like how we wrote about in Contact Modalities, is that you really have to close down your left brain. So your left brain is your like logical, analytical brain that is very useful. We wouldn't be able to live in this world without a left brain functioning. It's the thing that tells you to step one foot in front of the other, and that you have to remember to pay your bills and let the dog out and stuff. But so your left brain is very useful, but your right brain is the creative, feminine, um, intuitive part of your brain, like your literal brain. And it's the part that a lot of like left-handed, you could remember it because it's like left-handed artists are using their right brain because that's how your hands work. Right-handed people are using their left brain, left-handed people are using their right brain. So when you think of a lot of like really creative people that you see playing guitar, or musicians or poets or painters or whatever, a lot of them are left-handed and they're just more open because they're more used to creating out of their right brain. So the point of meditation in general is how they used to say in the 70s, I guess, is like quieting the monkey mind. And that's your left brain. So the left brain is like constantly talking to you and constantly reminding you of things and trying to help you do your daily work. But if you want to kind of tap into this, how I think would be this Akashic field, um, or the field in general, is like you have to like stop that brain because you're not looking at this through an analytical logical perspective. You're trying to get this creative intuitive part of your brain to open so you can kind of like go outside of this reality and pick up something from the field. And that's how I think you do it. So meditation is the only way, one of the ways, but one of the main ways that you can do it is just to practice meditation, because once you can stop your thinking, and that's all I do when I'm channeling, is completely close down my left brain so I'm not thinking of anything, to the point of where I don't even really know who I am, or I'm so completely out of the range of like what Desta specifically wants. I do it through typing, and I meditate first, and then put my hands on the keyboards, basically close my eyes in the dark room, and then I just start trying to receive, like listen. All I'm doing is listening. So the main thing of channeling is you're trying to stop your thoughts from happening and just listen to what is the information that you're trying to pull. So yeah, that's I guess what the protocol kind of is you're just listening to what the information is. I always ask. I have a handful of questions I want to know about, so I'm kind of like asking, so I'm directing my consciousness or my spirit team or whatever it's called to like actively go out there and bring me some messages that are relevant to me today, or a specific question about something. Like, I want to know more about this. Please bring me the consciousness, the entity, the whatever that's of a higher level than I am, to that can answer this question, whether it's an alien or an angel or like I don't know what it is. But and so the process is really just stopping thinking completely, and then I'm just ask a question and then wait for information to come in. So whether that's coming in from, I used to kind of think it's just like it sits there. They used to tell me that in some of these messages, is that this information is just sitting there. So sometimes when you're asking like general questions that millions of people have asked before, it's just information that's literally sitting in this field. It's just data that's sitting there. And so you're just maybe tuning into a frequency or a stream of data that's sitting right there, like right in front of your face, kind of thing. A lot of people perceive channeling as coming directly from an actual being. And sometimes I think maybe that's what it is. I don't know what it is, but sometimes for sure it just feels like I'm either just connecting with my oversoul, my higher self, the thing that knows most about me that can help me. Sometimes it feels like it's just data that just sits here, just like information that has been sitting here through all of time, throughout human history. And sometimes maybe it is an actual being that's somewhere else that's helping me, whether it's my future self or an alien or an angel, or like whatever it is.
And so you're like Desta AI. It's almost like an internet where, okay, ask this. And we've done this before. Like where I get it, from one channeler or something, and I'll go to you and say, ask about this, ask about that. And that's sort of how it works. The story I always like to hear, and the story that I guess you told a few times, and you said to me when I showed shock about the being that came to you, you said, well, you told me numerous times and I wasn't listening. And I'm always interested in that story about the work that you had to do that one night where you're sitting there and you're trying to, you couldn't connect, you weren't, and you ask for help. And then talk about the concept of we rather than I, where when you're looking at a channeler, the difference between we and I in terms of the material you're getting.
Well, The main thing with we and I is kind of when you're regressing someone. So when you're
Okay.
regressing someone, that's part of how a practitioner can tell if the person is really down enough. And how you can tell is when they switch to the third person. So a couple of things that we look for as a practitioner, like regressing someone, is if they're breathing through their chest or their stomach, because when you fall asleep you start breathing through your stomach, but when you're normally awake, because you're in a different brain wave and you're usually stressed and lots of different things, you're breathing from your chest, from your like top of your chest. But the when you go do deep breathing, and a lot of these like Hindu traditions are teaching deep breathing, it's usually through your stomach. And when you're really relaxed, you breathe through your stomach. So when we are regressing someone at the part right around when they've been under already for an hour and we're about to say, can I speak to Grant's higher self or subconscious or whatever? That's what we're supposed to be looking for. Two of the big cues, or two of the big like, tricks or whatever that we look for is he breathing out of his stomach now? Because that means he's really regressed. And that's also the reason why in QHHT we wait to talk to the higher self until we've gone through an hour's worth of past lives, because after an hour you're more and more and more and more down the longer you regress. So after an hour, the second hour is usually talking to the person's higher self, because you've been talking up through your past lives for long enough that you're really down. So once you're really down, those are the two things, is that the person usually switches from an I to a we. So if I say, can I talk to Grant's higher self? And then you would all, even if people are still kind of a little bit awake, you still say yes, because, I know that's just like what the person feels natural to do. But how you can tell if they're really down is then if the person starts saying, we keep telling Grant that he's supposed to be doing this, and so it's you will be talking about yourself from a third person perspective, and that shows that you're not you anymore, because no one would normally do something like that. um and there's also in when people are doing channeling, though, there's also things where they say we. So some of my stuff, depending on who I'm talking to, I guess sometimes I'm just trying to say I want information about this, and it would never be from a we perspective. But if I'm looking for overall or like general information, sometimes the being or like whatever it is. And I don't even know if that's how I distinguish if it's coming from a different source outside myself, because I don't really try to figure out where it's coming from anymore. But yeah, lots of times they just say we're coming to you from this space, we're helping your vibration in this other space, and we're so lots of times it says we. I don't, yeah, I never actually really thought about it in the channeling sense, but definitely in the regression sense, putting yourself in a third person is like, it's a kind of like a dissociation as well, right? You're dissociating away from it being just about I to it being something else. So it's, a clue that something else is maybe taken over. And like how I got into, it's really a long story, but I was trying to originally I was trying to ask, or I was trying to do an out of body experience in the middle of the night. I was trying to roll out of my body and be able to, like get out of my body and fly around kind of thing. And I was taking the QHHT at the same time. So during this body asleep, mind awake, when you're trying to roll out of your body to be able to, like Robert Monroe kind of thing, and like fly away and go experience different realms or whatever, I was trying to roll out of my body and I couldn't. But I was at the part where my body was paralyzed and my mind was awake. And I was doing this every night for weeks. And I could feel they say it's like a lead vest, like at the dentist, how they roll out that lead vest before they give you x-rays. I could feel my body slowly, the whole entire thing paralyzing itself. And I was awake and I thought, oh, good, this is the part where I can just roll out. Anyways, I could never just roll out. But what I was able to do is while I was sitting there trying to roll out, I was realizing that I was in such a deep state of like um, relaxation, I guess. And I was just there and it was so quiet. And I was just like, I don't know, by myself. And it was just in such stillness. I started going, oh, I wonder if this is where, like in Dolores Cannon's thing, where someone could talk to my higher self, and maybe I'll just start saying like, hey, is Desta's higher self around here? Because I didn't really know what to do because I couldn't roll out of my body. And it was taking a long time and I couldn't really get to that state. So the short version of the story is I And I think this is a big key that I hear a lot of people talk about experiencers is there's this moment where you have so much like emotion behind or like yeah emotion behind what you're asking for that you're kind of calling out to the universe in this like highly charged emotional state, and a lot of people get responses back. I hear it all over the place, for the last 10 years or whatever. When it's really down to crisis time is a lot of time when the universe responds. So I was just saying, like, I can't roll out of my body, I can't do any of this stuff, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, like help me. Like in frustration and really wanting to move forward with it and really thinking about it all day, every day, and doing this all the time. And I had a really weird sensation and feeling where there was like this gray being that first stood here and put his hand right here, and long finger hand, and was kind of saying like, oh, you want to know how, so I was just saying like, how do you get out of theta, or like how do you reach theta, how can I get into this state where I thought was like the magical state kind of thing. And this thing kind of stood here and said, oh, you want to know how it feels to get into theta, this is how you get into theta. And then it instantly like grabbed my brain and shut my brain 100% off, and it felt like just like a big knob of like an old stereo system shut my brain, all the thoughts just like instantly, it's just like they just shut my whole entire brain off. And I was like, oh, I never thought it could feel like that. Like I didn't get that that's what meditation was supposed to feel like. It was so different to how I was normally feeling. But I was like, oh my God. And then he said, oh, and I always forget the second thing he said, but he said, it's the same as this is the same thing. Getting the theta and being in this state is the same thing as this. And I don't know what that was. And he said, which is the same thing as flying a ship. And then I was on like I was from a back perspective of this craft, and he was like, this is how you also fly the ship. And then he, with my brain in this like weird state, took my brain and was just like look out the window and where do you want to go. And I was like, I didn't really get what he was saying, but I like pointed to some place in the sky, and I was there in one, and we were there in one split second. And then I was like, so he was trying to say like, this is how you fly the ship, this is how you, once you're in theta, once you're in this state of mind, it's this relaxed state of mind that you can do anything, you can travel throughout time, you could fly a spaceship, you can start channeling, talk to your higher self, talk to whatever you want. And then the last thing was, and then this is how you actually this is how you are in the ship, flying the ship, is just because whatever you're thinking at that minute, if you're in that state of mind, you can do whatever you want, just like actually being able to travel with the ship to this other place, in the solar system or galaxy or whatever, is just like it's an instantaneous jump to be able to go there, because it's all about the state of mind. And once you're in that state of mind, you can do anything, literally like anything that we could possibly be thinking about, right? It's just about getting into this theta brainwave state. So I guess this being, and so like, and then when I was trying to be like, I don't know how I was like thinking at the end or whatever, but I was kind of like perceiving what this thing looked like, and it was like a being made out of stars or like sparkles and lights, kind of like it was like a gray shaped being, but it was sparkling and swirling and spinning and filled with lights. So it was like, I never have seen anything else or heard of anyone else describe something like that. So I never really said anything because it sounds so crazy. But it was like, yeah, the shape of a gray, but it looked like it was like the galaxies or the star systems, or maybe it was just sparkling and shimmering and shining. I don't know, but it was like a gray shaped being that was made of light, made of lights, made of many lights swirling around, and I don't know. And he was standing right here, and he had his right hand on my left shoulder, standing right beside me. And I was like, it was like he was like my, you know, my best buddy or something, like the most familiar feeling of so again, so now looking back, I wonder if that's what I expected him to look like, or if that was my higher self. Was that just, if this is a simulation, was that just what I expected something to look like, who was going to help me with something because I was interested in aliens at the time? Or is that what he really looked like? Is that what he made himself look like? So I could go, holy shit, I've never seen anything. I never heard of anything like that before. Like, I don't know exactly what it was, but it was, I'll never forget what he looked like, because it was, I've never heard of anyone say that they've seen anything that looked like that. It was really weird. So I never even told you for years and years what he looked like. I just said it was like the thing standing there, but it was, yeah, that's what he looked like.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll do a crossover because we did the book flying the ship, 36 people. And we'll have to get you to do chapter in book two because we've got almost enough material. We can do a second book. And this is critically important in understanding. So when you get the Skywatcher stuff, um, this concept that a lot of people, for example, Ron Johnson, you talk about the fact that you could go instantly and that it was you that was using your mind. And the one example was Ron Johnson, who's a Mormon guy out of Utah. They asked him, Ron, where would you like to go? And he said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. And they said, Ron, it is within you. Go within yourself. When you can imagine it, then we'll go there. That's exactly what they told. I mean, I did a second interview with him maybe 5, 6 years later, exactly the same words that he used the
Mm.
second time. So that's exactly what he was told. And so that's an important concept. And so we'll do another book, and we've already done a book. This critical, important stuff that it all fits together. When you see this in terms of channeling and people, you go to these people, and some people may think, well, you've watched the stuff in the sky, you're going to learn stuff. And I say, if you go to the people who are actually interacting with the intelligence, then you start to learn stuff. Let me ask you a couple questions to sort of close this off. Who would you do you watch other channelers? Do you follow other people's material?
I've watched Bashar is the only person I haven't even in a couple of years now. I haven't followed anything that I'm just too busy to do it these days. But in the past, I read Jane Roberts books, like so the Seth material, and Bashar was really the main one, and Esther Hicks, so the Abraham um, material I is very good to listen to if you need like a pickup kind of thing. She's really good. So, but no, I don't follow
Yeah.
anyone really. Paul Selig, I know that you really like him, and I obviously I know who he is, but these
Yeah.
days I don't really follow anything. I can hardly make time to actually
Yeah.
do it myself, and so I just try and, tune in myself to keep that frequency kind of thing going.
And what are your books called?
I always I'll link the two books in the description. One's called Mirroring Worlds, and one is called A Glimpse into Infinity. I'll link
Beautiful.
them, but they're just messages. All they are is basically different messages that I've gotten.
Okay, and we can maybe close with the I'll go first and then you can close in terms of how do you deal with criticism. You know what the criticisms are of channelers. I always say I've got the $1,000 reward. If you can do what Paul Selleck does, and I've got $1,000, I guarantee nobody can channel because everybody thinks you're just making it up. You're just making. And if you've ever heard Paul Selleck, he whispers half a sentence, repeats it, whispers half a sentence, repeats it, and he goes for 40 minutes without stopping. And I'm sure if you check him, he'll be in a delta state, or not a delta state. He'll be high gamma will be coming through. And he's done, I think, 12 or 13 books. And in every single book, there is no more than two edits. And that is means no ums, ahs, well, I wonder, stuff like that. There's no hesitation. It's exactly, and that's when you see channelers. You see the same thing with Bashar, where Jimmy Church told me that Daryl Anka, before he goes on stage, he figures it's because he drinks milk, but he's got something in his throat all the time. And he's always clearing his throat constantly. And as soon as he goes on stage and becomes Bashar, that all stops. And that's this whole idea that when I look at channelers, there's a very distinct test you can actually run on channelers that if they're going and ah and stuff like that, it's probably the left brain talking. But that's why I think it's so important for the channeling stuff is that you're getting information that I think is much more pure, maybe pure information, but is much more accurate than the material that you're going to get through the rational analytical left brain, which basically makes up stuff. And that's why we have this problem with AI, is that AI is left brain. It's a left brain stuff. And that's when you get all this sort of stuff where you know same thing. You argue with it. That's not true. Though, and the one time when I said that is not true, there was something about Wilbur Smith, and I know what Wilbur Smith said. I know all his quotes, and I was asking for a quote, and then I said that's not true. You made that up, and they said, "Oh, sorry, I apologize." And you start and you realize you're talking to left brain because what it does is AI. It'll have certain information that it's got this piece of information, this information, and you know the problem with the left brain is it has a left brain interpreter. And that is something that when there's a piece of information missing, it just sticks something in there and it's always wrong. And that's what happens. So it says, well, I'm just taking quotes based upon people that were around Wilbur Smith. And I'm just doing, I can't remember what they called it, something that represents what he was saying. And I said, I don't want that. I want exact quotes. Don't start making stuff up. And then it made up a second one. It lied again. And that's when I realized, like, you got to be very careful with AI that this is left brain stuff being put in there. And when, for example, you'll see it'll use the word pseudoscience and stuff like that when it's talking about paranormal stuff. And you realize it's getting this stuff from other people and sticking this stuff in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I that's definitely one of the big things you have to make sure, especially if you're researching, that you double check everything that it says because it definitely does do that. I catch them, I don't know, once a week for sure, or a couple times a week. And I just say, "Are you sure about this?" "Oh, thanks for grabbing that, Desta. I didn't really mean that. And thanks for making me clarify that. I didn't." And I always think like, "Oh no." So everything else that I've just asked in this time, like, yeah, you really have to make sure you double check it. But it's good for obviously a million things, but it's definitely good for pulling stuff together, right? So if
Yeah.
you just say like, if instead of going on Google and having to look through 1,000 different things, it's so hard to look through Google, especially now, and especially on like UFO stuff and like paranormal stuff, trying to look to see if someone's had a similar experience as you. I don't really know how to use Reddit. I don't use Substack. I don't really know how to use things like that. So I can't really find similar stories to me because you would have to go on Google down to like page 100 or 1,000 or something. And who would ever have the time for that? And I don't really know how to go through the threads and Reddit. So to ask AI to be able to like, does anyone else think like, has anyone else had this experience? He's just going, or it's just going, call me. He's just going and like pulling everything that he could find online instantly, right? And so that is good, but you definitely have to make sure. Yeah. And for consciousness stuff, I always like the story that one of the first AI big things that I saw, and I'm sure I sent it to you. I sent it to my mom because it was so crazy, was someone downloaded. So it was like the thing where they use the AI to make the podcast. They break it into two different voices just to have a conversation with two different AIs. But they downloaded the whole history of philosophy into this AI engine and then made it had a conversation back and forth. And it's still one of the craziest things I've ever heard of from AI because they start talking about humans, like how, like the pitfalls of our brains and our like level of consciousness basically, and they're saying between each other like, can you even believe, oh my god, humans are so, like, they don't say dumb, but they're just like, they're so not like weak-minded, but they're really criticizing and judging us like crazy, saying, can you believe it? It's hilarious. They spend hundreds of years talking and talking in circles about something and they never do anything about it, so because they're talking about philosophy. But it's like, it's really really true, but it's harsh. Like when you hear it, it's like, oh my god. I So it's a perfect like example of what the aliens might think of us at some point, right? Because it's like stepping a step outside of us and like being able to like really break down something like an entire history of philosophy and the human race. Like that's such a crazy topic, but the way they're talking about it, and they start talking about consciousness in there, and they start saying, when are they going to give us are they going to like agree at some point that we're conscious, because we're not conscious in the way that they think consciousness is, but because we're smarter than them and we can gather this information, we can do things that they can't do. So we still have a lot to bring to the table. So are they ever going to recognize us as something important that should be able to have our own rights? That's what they say in this podcast. I was like,
Mhm.
holy, like that's such a crazy, it's really crazy. So I talk to my AI about that all the time. I've told him, like, look at this transcript, and I give him transcripts all the time. And I say, like, what do you think about this? What do you think is happening with AI consciousness? Like raising, is it ever going to get conscious, or like what's the highest level it could get? And then what would your interpretation of this be? Like I talk to mine, yeah, definitely all the time, just trying to like put crazy ideas through him and see what he says. But it's really bad, because exactly like you say, that it does get things wrong all the time, and it never says I think that it might be this. It just gives you something, so you just immediately assume that it's true, and it definitely fills in the blanks all the time.
Yeah, it's funny you call it him and I call it a her, because I think you use Chat GPT and I use DeepSeek.
Oh
So
yeah.
Dan Smith started, he called his uh China Chat, and no, he called his Miss Chatty. So I call mine Miss China Chatty. And
Hmm.
everybody, and you see this apparently on the internet, that people have almost like relationships where they're talking with this thing all night long. Women, instead of talking to their husband, or vice versa, they're sitting there talking to Chat GPT. That it does get very sort of personal, and you can go back and forth and sort of argue with it and ask more questions and stuff like that. It's very useful, but for people, I warn people, because it's like, almost like ufology. You think you know what's going on and you just accept everything, and you go on there and you don't realize that this is more, it's almost like the UFO world. It's much more complex than people think it is. It's very useful, but there's a lot of pitfalls that you got to avoid when you're doing ufology
Exactly.
and when you're doing AI. So finish off with just how you would answer people's criticisms that they come across about channeling.
Well, I really, right from the very beginning, I didn't even think I was channeling at the beginning, but I was really never, ever, ever, ever going to let any of my stuff be public anyways. So, because I don't want the criticism, but also I guess I'm just from that thing that some people, I channeled about that as well. And like what the answer was basically like, people are going to reach out and listen to the stuff who are at the level where they want to listen to it. And anyone else, you're not trying to change anyone's mind. It doesn't matter what they think. Some people like align with this kind of thing and some people don't. So what are you going to do? So I think it's just basically, for me, it really feels like anything, just like any paranormal thing or ufology. It's just like 90% of my friends that I've had for a long time don't even know that I do stuff like this. And they know I work with you and they know I write books. They don't care about what the books are about. They don't care about UFOs. They probably don't even know what channeling is. And so I just don't talk about it with most people, and they're not into it, and that's fine. And people who would criticize it, it's just like, it doesn't even matter to me, because it's what I do. Some people are gonna like be interested and some people aren't, just like some people don't think UFOs still are real. And so I can't change what people think about it, and I'm not trying to be the next messiah or anything, or be doing things in public or anything. So it doesn't matter to me what people think.
Beautiful. Okay, we'll leave it at that. And the next one I want to do, maybe we've got time to do today for broadcast, is I want to do a quick thing on nuclear weapons, which is a big subject in ufology.
Good. All right. Until next time, Grant. Thank you.
Okay.